program that we did in the fall that talked about what's going on with the Cape Fear River. We know that there's desire to widen and deepen it. It's got a lot of negative impacts to our area here. We talked some about that. Roger, who's going to talk a little bit more this evening, is going to go into some further details, but we also asked Brayton Willis to come in. Brayton is a U.S. Corps of Engineers senior project manager, retired. He knows a lot about what the Corps does, and he's got some incredible keen insights he's going to share with you. We're going to talk a little bit about what's next, right? So we've gone through a process of feedback. They've done a environmental impact statement that's come out. We've had comments regarding that, and now there's some next steps. And I think it's still really important to really understand the impact that widening the river is going to have, deepening the river is going to have. But it's not just the river, right? It's the impact of what's happening with the bridge and the replacement of the bridge and all that's going to impact. So we're going to talk about that tonight. We'll have time for your questions after both Brayton and Roger conclude, and we'll go ahead and get started. So Brayton, please take it away.
Thank you so much. Yep, I know what the Corps does, both good and bad. I'm going to keep the trade secrets. You need a mic? Yeah, you need a mic? Okay. So, long story short, yeah, I retired from the Corps after about 30 years. I enjoyed the heck out of it, but like all organizations, we have issues that pop up periodically, and one of those issues that popped up right here in our local area is the dredging, making the Cape Fear River deeper. I spent a whole lot of time going through the port's feasibility report. I spent a whole lot of time looking at the draft EIS, and I've written numerous letters to my fellow Corps people and also to DEQ stating some of my concerns. And one of those I want to talk about tonight, but I thought that what I would do is I would start off with a NEPA primer. In the Corps of Engineers, all of our senior managers go through NEPA Education 101, 102. Before we go any further, are there any Corps plants in here?
Here comes one now.
Do we have anyone that's worked in the EPA? No? Okay. Do we have anyone that's gone through formal training in NEPA, which is the National Environmental Policy Act? Anyone? No? Okay, so we're starting. I'm going to take a 2-week course and spend 10 minutes making you guys experts. So to shorten that whole thing up, you guys have got the handouts. Right here in this little red area is where the Corps of Engineers is currently working. They're preparing the draft EIS. They've taken enough of public comments. When they finish with all of the public comments, digesting that, which I hope there's a lot, they'll do their final environmental impact statement, publish a record of decision, and implement that decision. But I'm not going to go through and read the rest of that for you. You guys have got it. Now you're graduates. And it was for free. So anyways, there is an important piece to all of this. And that's on the flip side of your handout. And for the sake of argument, if I take a rock and throw it in the middle of a quiescent pond, what do you guys see? Ripples, right? Well, the same thought process is, when you take a look at NEPA, the same process is, what are the ripple impacts of that project? Now, NEPA gets involved with federal projects where either the federal government is doing it or they're funding it. And in that particular case, NEPA is an umbrella law that was I think President Nixon in 1970 signed it into law, and it covers all of the environmental issues that one could imagine that would relate to that initial rock being thrown or that project being thrown and the ripple impacts that come from it. Now, if I'm not making sense, I'm going to try to make a little bit of sense here. When you throw the rock in, when you have a project like deepening the Cape Fear River, direct effects and indirect effects are things that the Corps, and actually the Corps was supposed to do this as well in their 203 report, to go through and analyze. It could be cultural, environmental, ecosystem. Roger's going to talk about some of that here in a little bit. And one that particularly caught my attention was transportation. Now, one would think, well, we're bringing the ships up the river, offloading the cargo. Transportation, right? There's something missing in all of the report work that has been done either by the Corps or by the port. And I'll give you an example real quick. So, ship comes in, let's pretend that this is all the cargo that comes in on a ship. It could be, I'm going to use the term TEUs. That's the containers. They're 8 by 8 by 20 that you see stacked up on the ships. Maybe 12,000 TEUs. And it sits there. But then the question became, at least in my mind, where does it go from here? Where does it go from here? How does it get from the port to wherever they're going to take it?
Trains,
What, go ahead.
train and truck.
Trains and trucks, very good, very good. So under the no-build conditions for the project, without project, trucks, trains carry that stuff off. But now we deepen it a little bit more so we can bring in one of the mega ships. And some of those mega ships can be up to 20,000 TEUs, depending upon their draft. So now, we were getting this out okay on trucks and trains. Been doing that for years. How are we going to get these out?
More trucks and
More. Okay. If you go through all the documentation that the port and both the Corps put together, nothing. It's silent. And so if you've got these trucks hauling or trains hauling this, there's some, and this is my opinion, direct effects. Because without the cargo coming in, you don't need trucks or trains, but now it's here. By the way, there's a term when freight sits at the port for a long time. It's called frustrated freight. And it's particularly tough for the port to move this if they don't have trucks and trains. I want to re-emphasize that. Now, direct effects, indirect effects, we're going to hear a little bit more about those effects with Roger. But see these numbers over here, and they're on your handout. Can anyone make any sense of those? This is engineering stuff.
Well, it's probably 70,000.
No? Anything look familiar there? This is what I've been working on for a long time.
Well, 9,000 by 8,000 is 70.
Okay. Right now, according to my research, there's roughly 70,000 vehicles going across the Cape Fear Bridge every day. 60, 70,000, somewhere in that range. The average number of trucks, 18-wheelers, fully loaded with one of those TEUs, about 800 a day. 800. A lot of trucks. You see them going over the Cape Fear Memorial Bridge. One, and I've got citation for all of this, if anyone wants to challenge me on this, I got it. One of those fully loaded 18-wheelers is equal to, how many cars? 9,000 cars. So 9,000 times
That's what I said.
800.
That's what I said.
Did I get the math right on that one?
No, sure.
In terms of,
On one day, 7,200,000 equivalent cars going down our roads and across the Cape Fear Memorial Bridge. Now, that's the truck side of it, except for one thing. How many people have driven over the Cape Fear Memorial Bridge and bounced? That's an impact load, which makes things worse for the Cape Fear Memorial Bridge. Now, you guys, you should be spinning now, thinking about all of that. It did for me, but if you haven't, I'll get to it later. Wilmington Realignment Project. One of the things that was explained to me is that project is got a couple of purposes. Number one, to haul additional freight from the port. There's some discussion about increasing the length of the trains to handle the freight coming through the port. Could be more than, well, I think they're up to about 10,000 foot-long trains, 2 miles roughly, going across the 32 crossings. 32 crossings, taking the hairpin out, which is a great idea. $1 billion. Lots of environmental issues you got to take care of. Another bridge. 2 miles. Not anywhere in the report. No, anywhere in the port's report or any consideration in the Corps' work. Nowhere. Now, with a benefit cost ratio of about 1.3, that makes these particular two issues, trucks and trains, an important factor. The Cape Fear Memorial Bridge, $1 billion. The railroad line, $1 billion. $2 billion that's not factored into the economics. And if it was, it could pull the benefit cost ratio down below 1. Kills the project. Now, the Corps may argue, well, we've been doing this for years. We've never had to do this before. Port may say the same thing. Want to bring more cargo in? Frustrated freight? Are they going to get it out? More trucks? More trains? We know that this is what they're aiming for. Not in the reports. That's just one example of NEPA, how NEPA applies when you start looking at direct impacts. And this is a direct impact. No question about it. I'll stake what's left of my reputation on it. Not much left. No, I'm kidding. I managed to make it through 30 years of the Corps. I guess I got somewhere with it. So that is what I want to leave you with on NEPA. And if you understood this, then your next question would be, help me somebody. Somebody. Okay, I'm going to give you one more hint. If you drive down South College, and you take a look where the port trucks are coming down, you see these grooves in the road, 18-wheelers.
Yes.
Who pays for that?
We do.
Is that a subsidy?
Yeah.
Taxpayer subsidy? Who's being asked to replace the Cape Fear Memorial Bridge? Mm-hmm. So that's another thought. Keep that in mind because the port has done more damage to that bridge. The bridge really wasn't designed to handle that load of traffic. And by the way, there's a state law that says in the evenings the port can accept overloaded trucks to go over the Cape Fear Memorial Bridge. State law. So I'm going to end it at that. There's just one point. There are many other points. I don't know if Roger's going to get into PFAS at all in the dredge materials, but if that's something of interest to you, I'd be glad to speak on that as well. It's going to get kind of interesting on that discussion down the road. One last thing. The largest cargo ship to come up and stop at the port to unload. Anyone know what that was? That was Zim Mount Rainier. As a 42-foot draft, the river is dredged to 42 feet right now. So obviously they had to do one of two things, either drag their tail through the mud or take some of the load out so that it couldn't make the port. That was a big deal. I think that wasn't too long ago, maybe a year or two ago. So that's my take on NEPA. If you understand NEPA now, you can do my job. Yes, ma'am.
Well, this may be a little early to ask, but when I first arrived in town in the late 80s, I heard this whisper about people who wanted to move to port, and I thought, that is the silliest thing I've ever heard of. That's unimaginable. Well, now it's the only thing I can think about. I really wanted to move that port.
Okay.
25 miles down the road.
You and I are thinking alike on that. That was another one of my comments. The board owns 600 acres down by Southport. And of course, there was a move back in '09. The No Port Southport people, my wife happened to be the core project manager on that recon report, and I call it reconnaissance report. And the No Port Southport forced them right out. Another one, and I was told this would never work by a core employee, is Morehead City. Now, Morehead City has got on Radio Island 150 odd acres, I may have that wrong, and they could easily, even though they're a bulk loaded, they handle materials that, that's an easy way to say it, maybe like grain, soft stuff that you can repackage and send out. But that 150 acres could easily be turned into container. They've got a railhead there. Argument might be, well, the highways aren't as good. And maybe the rail doesn't have the capacity to, get down the road. But still, your thinking is correct. What are the other alternatives that could preserve and maybe restore 26 miles of the Cape Fear River? That's good thinking.
Cost advantage. I mean,
Oh, it'd be huge. It would be huge, but it's not practical. All the port did was say, we're going to take a look at that narrow project footprint. That's all they did, all the way up to the ocean. That's another thing about Morehead City. It's only 4.5 miles out to the ocean. But, you're exactly correct. And I put that in the letter to the Corps saying, hey, why is your scope so narrow? And I think the Southern Environmental Law Center may have said the same thing. I'm not sure, but I have to go back and take a look at their letters as well. Other thoughts? Yes, sir.
A question and a comment. I don't quite understand what you mean by equivalent on that 9,000.
Equivalent, so if...
It's dynamic loading.
and the impact of an fully loaded 18-wheeler.
Is that on the bridge you're talking about?
Oh, on roads.
On the road.
Roads and bridges.
All right.
Now, the bridges take on a little different structural issue because when you're going across, especially Cape Fear Memorial, the grates there will tend to bounce. So now you're translating wheel load about 6 times that of a standard car.
All right.
And that's why it's getting, over time, gets more and more bowed.
And one other thing, it may be obvious, but all these trucks and trains running through our city are carrying stuff. And so some of that stuff is going to be toxic, right? I mean, we haven't had a derailment and a toxic event here, but the more of that stuff that comes through the port, the higher the risk is.
What's Laura's bit last name? Paget, thank you. It was drawing a blank. Laura Paget and I had a long discussion about that. Over in the other side of the world, over in Leland area, we have the military plane trains. They carry rockets and all sorts of stuff down to Rocky Point. Sorry. So I asked her, I said, well, do any of those deliveries make their way over to this port if the other port's busy? Yes. Yes, they do. And if you take a look at the Sunny Point layout for the rails, there's like a 2-mile corridor that they have. It might be 2 miles. And then they have blast zones and all sorts of stuff. There's nothing like that over here. There's nothing. And I don't know if they're still doing that, but at the time that I talked with her 2 years ago, they were. It may not be much, but you're right. It could be hazardous material. It could be a problem.
Question.
Yes, ma'am.
As you know, Brayton, we've been asked to comment, environmental agencies, nonprofits, to try and get the Corps to wake up. And we're getting responses now that the Corps is no longer interested in the public comments, but they are only going to take into account expert advice. So where do we go from here?
Now, I hadn't heard that. But I would say that Richard and your group here, the Sierra Club, has a strong arm
Yeah, the public comment period for the draft EIS to the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers closed, and
Yes.
then there was a public comment period for Division of Coastal Management,
Indeed.
and that is closed, and so now they're reviewing.
No, it's not.
Oh, that one's
It's
still.
open until January 19th.
Okay.
Now, I can't tell you what the Corps' future on the DEIS is. I looked real quick, and I couldn't see any future dates for public input, but it's my understanding that they may be able to go around on the public side.
And I think there was time with the Southern Environmental Law Center.
Yes, sir.
The Corps of Engineers didn't come up with the idea of making the port more capacity. Whose idea was it? Who told the Corps, do an environmental impact statement because we want to bring Cadillac ships into Wilmington?
Yeah, that would go back to the Port of Wilmington and your legislators at the state level. Now, I will say this, the Corps of Engineers is driven by either the port is driven by politics. I'll back up a little bit. They were driven by the port on this one, but by politics or our buddies up there at the Supreme Court. This doesn't fall under that. And then any presidential dictates.
So somewhere a general in Washington told the Corps,
Yep.
we want you to study this.
Yep. And actually, they gave the port the authority to do their own feasibility, which kind of surprised me because normally the Corps is responsible for the feasibility study, the Section 203. That's what I've worked on out west. We did all of that legwork to put that together, including the EIS as well. So this was an anomaly that was authorized by your friends in Congress. That's the only ones that would say this is how this particular report will be put together. They get that authority.
One last question. We were at a meeting this weekend, and several of the people had summer homes down here and along the coast, and they were totally unaware that there was the possibility of dredging and the impact it would have. Totally unaware. They said, if we could get the word across the state, they thought there would be really a response. They were shocked and asked, how do you get that word into Charlotte? And walking around in the western part of the state that comes down here and have summer homes or come for vacation. And, you know, welcome to Gen X Beach. It's just,
Well,
we've got to figure out a way to get the word out.
you know, if you can, we always say we got one vote, but if you can get a large group of people together and get that before the politicians, they certainly, I think, would pay more attention. That's been my experience. And I wouldn't even bat an eyelash to call my congressional staffers, representatives, give them a buzz. But just shut their lines down with phone calls saying, this is what we want to have down here. And it works. It does work.
Frank, let me just make a comment. I think with the upcoming midterm elections, now is really an important time to provide feedback. I think that is a very strong call to action that we all can take in contacting your legislators, letting them know how important this is, how you go support it. You're not going to, support them if they don't support what we want, and that hopefully will have some kind of impact.
And another thing that just occurred, I know it was the town of Leland and the town of Belleville. I don't know about the city of Wilmington, but they were signing resolutions opposing. And so if you know a community, I don't know if Wilmington, do you know if Wilmington put together one, or the county?
Wilmington did sign a resolution.
Did they? So those are the types of things too that can gather momentum.
I think it's important for people to know it's not like either they enlarge or nothing. That we are going to have an ongoing need for the small and medium-sized ports, and we have a good reputation for what we have now, and that's what we need to keep.
Well, and I think the economics play that out. I think that when the economists take a look at this, they're going to say, it's when you start adding in things like transportation, when you start adding in the issues like Roger's got going on the environmental ecosystem side, when you add in the impacts of future floods, climate change, Roger, how's your time? I'm going to say one more thing, and then So PFAS. The Corps is an authorized program called beneficial use of dredge materials. That's what I said. It really is a good program when you don't have contaminants. And it's going to get wilder. Right now, we've got decades of PFAS coming down the river, filling up the prisms. I guess there's some testing going on. I think Cape Fear River Watch might be doing some testing. But it's out there, amongst other things, too, out in the river. But beneficial use of dredge materials, you can put on beaches, you can make islands, and that's what I think was being proposed by the port. You can find it down on the beaches in the fall. So that's a challenge as well, and I think the Corps is saying that we have no regulations on it yet. And one of the things that NEPA asks, are we going to have a challenge down the road that would impact us if we do this project? And operation and maintenance. That could be a big challenge for the Corps if that contaminant level reaches a point where they can no longer use those dredge materials. That's not in the report either, because PFAS was not really identified when the 203 report was rolling down the road. And I will say this one last thing, and I'll let Roger take the stage and we'll do Q&A later. My friends over at Brunswick County, they're building an RO plant to take PFAS and PFOA out, and they're going to discharge it, highly concentrated, 5,000 gallons a day, PFAS and PFOA 3 miles above the port, forever and ever as long as that plant operates. sustainable fishing. PFAS is getting into our shellfish. They don't talk too much about here, but you can go out and look at worldwide examinations, shellfish, crabs, things like that. So I made my 2 cents in a letter, sent it off to the Corps, sent it off to DEQ. Go for it. I mean, take a look at some of the letters that have gone out and just plagiarize like hell. You could even do a petition. Huh? You can even do a petition. Petitions work. I know that there's been a few petitions lately that have worked pretty well. So I'm going to turn this over to Roger because I want to save a little time in the end if we got other questions that.
What is the governor standing? As a governor, I mean, that's
I
my
don't.
question.
I really don't know. Every time I show up at his office, he closes the door. I'm just kidding.
Take my card.
Okay, those are many of the questions that actually are very important to what we've got in the area. And so let me emphasize a couple of those points as well as a few other ones. And of course, the DEIS that was done. And by the way, just to make sure everybody knows, DEQ and DCM are making comments until January 20th. Ours are done. We can't make any more comments. Ours ended on December 20th. Okay? So the Army Corps has given DCM, Division of Coastal Management, the opportunity to explain what they're doing and make comments and explain to them why they should be looking at all these things. So your comments are done with this DEIS for now, okay? Just want to make sure everybody's clear on that. That doesn't mean that we can't do comments. You just can't send them directly right now to the Army Corps as part of the public process, okay? So one of the things that's with this, of course, is we got a lot of price tags. Everything's $1 billion plus these days. The bridge, the port, and the port is estimated at $1.36 billion. And in looking at most of that is associated with dredging, although there's a lot of other, costs as well. And that's really what this is showing you. This is a breakdown, and what I'm showing you is actually from the DEIS report. Multi-thousand pages of information. So the question is, the fact that there's a lot of economic benefit to our ports. As it says there, $16 billion a year to the state economy, 88,000 jobs. All that has taxes, local, state taxes that are very important to everybody. So the question then becomes, what should we do based on the information that we have? And so should we try to compete with Charleston, Norfolk, Savannah? Charleston's at 52 feet right now and Savannah's at 47. Norfolk is going to 51 as well. So should we spend the $1.36 billion? Should we risk losing aquatic habitat and freshwater marsh ecosystems? Should we support those mitigation plans that are actually put in the report that are going to mitigate for that aquatic loss as well as the freshwater wetlands loss? Should sediment testing pilot projects be required for the sediment? Because it does have, as Brayton mentioned, PFAS and 1,4-dioxane as well. And should the EIS provide wisdom or approaches to this issue? But hopefully it does. So what I want to do is cover a couple of things. So this is basically what Brayton showed. So I don't want to go into this anymore, other than say, NEPA, by the way, this is the Environmental Act, 1969. This is the one that sets up everything else for doing environmental impact statements and environmental assessments. By the way, this is what the current administration is looking to roll back some of the regulations on as well, just to let you know. That's another day's talk. But. So what it says here, though, is must consider both current and future reasonably foreseeable environmental harms. That's the key takeaway for me, and the one that I hope you really take a look at. So, in looking at this, don't worry about all these words. These are things that I use to say to send to people as well. So, I've got my 20 pages that I've sent to everybody. And so these are the kinds of things that you got. There is a 3.1 inch tidal range change that's going to occur with this deepening. There's going to be a salinity variation of 1.28 parts per thousand at the surface and 2.5 at the bottom layer. That's because salt water is heavier than fresh water. So whenever you deepen and widen, it's called hydraulic drag. It's easier for stuff to move in and out as you go. Okay? So easier for stormwater to move up the river too. So one of the things that we've got is sea level rise scenarios that are in this to delineate what we've got as issues. There's going to be upwards of 1,071 acres that's going to be converted with that saltwater intrusion. That's going to change freshwater wetlands. These bottomland hardwoods that we got along the river, like up at Sledge Forest and others. And so it's going to change those from what we call freshwater wetlands and bottomlands to what we call oligohaline, which means that it's going to change into more marsh grasses that are saltier. Okay? We're in an estuary. Okay? Up there is the ocean. I'm at the port of Wilmington. So everything gets smaller as it goes toward here. So basically what you have is a wedge of water moving up that river. So one of the things I wanted to specify too, because this is really important. A lot of people have asked me about the groundwater. I look at groundwater quite a bit. So in looking at this, a consideration is there going to be groundwater contamination? Well, you have to look at the hydraulic models, and we've asked them to do some more thorough work, but basically the current hydraulic models say that the Cape Fear River, because of its pressure, if you will, and the groundwater pressure is actually higher than the Cape Fear River water pressure. So what you have is what we call a gaining stream. So the water is actually flowing from the aquifer into the river and not vice versa. If the river had higher pressure, it would basically be pushing maybe PFAS contaminated waters into those aquifers. Really important, but that's what the current model shows. So really important. So 35 million cubic yards of sediment, 3% is hard rock in the river that's got to be taken out. So there's the plan. I'm going to go through some of these quickly. The red is in the river, the green is in the ocean, basically, because the green actually starts up there at Battery Island, and then the red up there. The green is going to be 49 feet, the red's going to be 47 feet, okay? So the deepening in the river is 47, but you're going to 49 in the ocean.
And how much do they have to remove to get to that depth?
35 million cubic yards.
I mean, is it 2 feet or 1 feet? Or...
Let me show you. So, question, how much are we going to remove? Okay, so right now we're at 42 or 44 in the ocean. So basically 5 feet in each, but it's not 5 feet really. There's a buffer that you can go down to. So what you see there in blue, don't worry about the numbers again. That's going from the port, the anchorage basin, we call it, all the way out. This is the offshore extension, Bald Head Shoal, Smith Island, Battery Island, right there. So this is where you're going to be deepening from, 44 to 49, and this is where you're going to be deepening from 42 to 47. But while I'm showing you this blue thing, it's not just deepening, it's also widening. So everything you see in blue there's going to be some widening of the channel as well. And where it's dark blue, they're widening it even more. Okay? So what does that actually look like? So there's the picture. So what we're at right now is this thing down here. This is where we're at now. This is what you're going to deepen it to. So that's the widening part, as you see. And the other thing that you look at with this is the 42 feet up the river right here. So there's an allowable 2 feet of further deepening because you can't judge exactly where you're at on the bottom. I mean, they got this huge dredge, they're pulling up all that sediment. So they allow you to go, 2 feet beyond that. In fact, in some cases, they would encourage that. But I don't say that. But they could encourage that because that would give them the extra safety factor that's there. And in the rock areas where you have to take out the rock, you're actually allowed 3 feet. Because that's really difficult to look at. Okay? Everybody with me so far?
Yeah.
Right. So, in looking at this thing, what you got then is this picture. What's in the sediment? Well, there's sand and there's silty clay sand and clay silt. I love this stuff. I don't know about you guys. There's a mix. There's soft rock, hard rock. Some crap's unknown. So, in fact, what they do with this is they go down the river and they take samples. Okay, they take both surface samples and shallow pore samples as well to determine this. Why do I need to know that? I want to know how much I can put on the beach for renourishment. I want to know how much is going to be muds or silts that I can put in for beneficial placement or not within the marsh system. And so as you see here, 17% is pretty good sand. And of course that beneficial placement includes things that's going to be put on Bald Head Island, Oak Island for beach renourishment. And you all know the value of beach renourishment. I mean, beach renourishment really pays for itself. And there's a lot of arguments, but return on investment on beach renourishment is really pretty good. Okay? And tourists do not like narrow beaches. So in looking at this thing, what you can see then is with that sediment that's going to be taken out, half of the dredge material is going to be used for beneficial placement. 15 million cubic yards is going to be used for beneficial placement. And when you look at this, what you can see with this picture then, see the yellow? Those are beach renourishment sites. And all these bluish areas are areas where there's going to be beneficial placement of silts, clays, and a mixture of those things. And those beneficial placements are going to be for three things. So in addition to the renourishment, one is going to be for raising marsh level. With sea level rise, the marshes aren't keeping up with sea level rise. So one idea is to add thickness to that. Okay? Another thing to do with this is put it along areas like Matsu, that's the military ocean terminal at Sunny Point. You know, Brunswick town would be going into the ocean with some of the ship wake if they hadn't put those blocks in to keep that from being impactful. And the last one is to use some of that on bird islands. In fact, Lindsay is working right now to put additional bags and protection around some of those bird islands because they're being washed over. They're getting lower, and they need to be high. Birds don't like grass. That's not where they lay their eggs. So if you lose the sand, then you're not going to be doing too well for our birds. Okay? So the bird islands of South Pelican, Ferry Slip, and North Pelican Islands, all of those need materials. So there is possible benefits with that. Okay? Anyway, that's what all those numbers are. By the way, where are you going to put the rock?
The ocean.
That's what they're going to do. They're going to make reefs. At the wharfs. So right there is the offshore fisheries enhancement structure. So that's making artificial reefs. Where is some of the sediment going to go that is not going to be used for beneficial placement? Out into this area, which is the offshore dredge disposal area. Okay? And all these other ones are sites you're going to put the 15 million cubic yards. So just very quickly, what does that look like? These are some of the sites. There's the artificial reef area offshore. This is renourishment on Bald Head Island. This is looking at Brunswick Town, put sediment all along there to protect Brunswick Town. And then this is looking at some of there's North Pelican, but also just in these marsh areas to put that material in. So this is something that, is very important because I know you do, and I love my birds. So these are things that we really need to look at. There's possibility of protections and good things to happen with these. By the way, we got over 25% of most of the waterfowl nesting sites in North Carolina, right there in the river. So it's really a positive thing. So let me bring up what Brayton was asking or making comment on, which he said very well. So it turns out at a public meeting that the Corps had, I went in and asked, as several did, like Bob Parr and others, we went in and asked whether they're going to test for PFAS or 1,4-dioxane in the sediment. And they immediately said, kind of sheepishly and regretfully, I think, that those are not regulated by EPA. We can't do anything with that. So that's not part of the process. So, as Brayton had in his NEPA 101 course, EIS must assess current and future potential harm. That was my first slide, as I said, and Brayton's too. And in fact, in the bind your rules, that's really important, starting in 2029, PFOA and PFAS, we're going to have 4 parts per trillion limits. Okay? You would have to adhere to those in your maximum contaminant load. So, they also had 10 parts per trillion for Gen X, PFHXS, PFNA, and it created a hazard index for a combination of those things. Okay? What's happened now? Well, all of these are no longer going to be as part of the plan for contaminant loading. No rules, no regulations. But PFOA and PFAS, even though it's been moved from 2029 to 2031, those are still going to have the 4 parts per trillion contaminant load. Why is that important? Because must assess current and future potential and what's going to happen in 2031. Those rules are going to come into place. When's dredging? Dredging is going to start in 2030 to 2031. Therefore, they have to, by the EIS, do that analysis. I'm telling you, they have to. That's what we should be telling the guys. Okay? And it's going to take 6 years to dredge this thing. So even though you delay another 2 years, it's still going to be in that window. And why should we include 1,4-dioxane? Because EPA has already recognized that 1,4-dioxane is or does pose an unreasonable risk to human health, causing cancer, liver, and nasal tissue damage. 1,4-dioxane must be looked at as well. Okay?
Roger, you also know that 1,4-dioxane and a little red compound we use in Vietnam are synonymous. Agent Orange.
All of these things, and there's others to be looked at as well. Okay? So, anyway, that's really, really important.
Roger, just a quick one. When you talk about dredging, how frequently is that dredging going to occur once they got to those depths? Your assessment.
Quick question on that. What you have to do is maintenance dredging all the time. You always see that dredge, that small dredge there at the anchorage basin. And that's because sediment, when you deepen, it piles in a little bit more around that area too. So they're dredging all the time there. What they've said in the report is that there's going to be more dredging required associated with this deepened depth. All right, let me very quickly, I'm sorry, but this is a long story. So, mitigation measures. So what are they going to do? That salt water is going to change our systems, right? Our marsh and fresh water. So therefore, it's required to have mitigation plans. And that mitigation plan then, for those, is to do some things in the river. Whenever you mitigate, I always think you should mitigate in that river basin. You shouldn't do it outside of another area. Never made any sense to me, but it's allowed. The other thing that is true is not just the salt water change, but this is what's going to happen with a 1-foot rise in sea level. So all of this is land right now. But with 1 foot of rise, which would occur by 2050, give or take, that's what our, by the way, science panel, CRC, has said, basically following NOAA's lead. That's all that's left. Everything else has turned to water. Now, the development is proposed here, but I just want to highlight that this wetland area, which is the natural heritage part of this site, is what we're talking about. But what if I bring in more salt water? Then I'm changing all of that area dramatically and even faster for us. So what are you going to do to mitigate that? Well, there's two plans. One of them, which I really applaud, and by the way, this is how you should look at this, in my opinion. What you should look at with this is that you may not like the port deepening, but what if it does happen? We should also be making comments as to what we would like to see if they do deepen that area too. And that's what this part is. So one of the proposals is to buy 600 acres up in here to keep that in conservation for perpetuity. And by the way, the only way to ensure protection is to buy it. And thank you very much for the things that sometimes, we have issues in politics, but I'm telling you, our city council and our county commissioners over the past few years, you should applaud these guys. I'm honest. There's been some real wins, not just for the environmental side, but for the community at large. So it's a really big plus. But this one sucks. Now, what they're proposing here is on Eagles Island, and I'm on the Eagles Island Coalition. But the reason that's no good is because they're thinking about trying to get rid of Phragmites and do a, now it's a laudable goal to remove Phragmites, an invasive species, but it's been shown over and over again that it has limited success in its removal. This stuff, if you've ever been, you want something that has great roots on it, get you some Phragmites. Okay? So I would move that and buy more acreage to guarantee preservation. Well, what about the other part? I'm gonna move forward. The aquatic habitats here, there's the indicator species that are impacted. You look at primary nursery grounds. You got to look at, by the way, something that's not mentioned in there. It's in there, but it's not really in detail. It's the macroinvertebrates on the bottom of the river basin too. That infauna and epifauna that's in the river is pretty important to us. So anyway, there's some adverse impacts with that. And I showed you some birds. Got to show you some fish. So all these guys, all those anadromous fish species are the ones that are at risk for those primary nursery grounds. So what have they done to say that we could actually make it better for them? Well, you know there's a rock arch rapid up at Locking Dam number 1. That's allowing our fish to move up and over the dam. Okay? So basically this is the rock arch rapid. So by the way, I keep wanting to take my kayak down that thing and have some whitewater rapids. But this is an area right there that's it's been getting shad over the thing pretty good, but not striped bass. Striped bass are picky. Okay, so what do they say? Well, what we can do is we will do a side channel up and around Locking Dam number 1 there. Okay, so that's one thing that you can do. Second thing they said is, I pointed to the wrong one second. This is Locking Dam number 2. What they're suggesting is to make a rock arch rapid at Locking Dam number 2, in addition to 1. Okay? We got 3 locking dams. I got to get beyond all 3 of those to be able to go with river and spawn. So what can I do? My opinion is $32 million to put a rock arch rapid at Locking Dam number 2. I suggest blow the sucker out of the water. And what you could do is you could take down this dam. You can't do that at 1 and 3 because there's water reservoir needs behind those. There's not at Locking Dam 2, but there's ownership issues. But take that out and then use that money to put at Locking Dam 3, and now I've got my fish happily going up to the fall line. All right, so just covered this. Basically it says, in the future without and future with project conditions, the same volume of cargo is assumed to move through the Wilmington Harbor. Channel modifications would allow for more efficient vehicle vessel use. Okay? I mean, that's the bottom line. Larger ships will mean fewer trips, but not necessarily any change in volume of cargo to the port with any of the alternatives. And the annual benefit is $15 to $21 million with the benefit to cost ratio of 1 to 3. Not fantastic, but still, you know. But what if we throw in some of the other things like Brayton mentioned in this cost benefits scenario? And so in looking at this, whenever I do anything, I weigh pros and cons. There is some pros to this. It could be good pros for beneficial placement. It could be good pros for, you know, bringing in more ships. If they actually change the stress factor with the ships in the river, like they say, it's not going to be as bad as what it would be for some of the wave damage that some people are assuming. But Those are assumptions. So what I look at is I weigh all these things. There's increase in tidal range, increase in storm surge. These are going to exacerbate sea level rise and flooding. So in looking at these things, they're going to jeopardize habitat. They're not addressing the PFAS and the toxins in the report. And on the side, if they're actually going to do this, they need to look again at what they're saying for their mitigation sites. Because I think each one of those could be benefited by doing something different for those areas. So we need to require the testing. By the way, UNCW has looked at sediment. I proposed a couple of more studies, one that goes like a transect across the river, a couple of places up and down, all the way from Wilmington up to Fort. Then I know what's in the marsh, in the edge, in the channel itself, and all the way across. That would be a true benefit study. And so the other thing that they've done, though, in sampling this, they found PFAS in the sediment, obviously. They have done some work in oysters. We know it's in oysters, right? You mentioned the foam in that. We know that it's in our alligators, and we know that it's in, our crabs as well. So it's just one of those things that I would like to see is them do a pilot study, take some sediment out, analyze it. If it's okay, then do a couple of year study, put that in a beneficial placement to see how well it does, to keep the marsh growing. That way by 2030 and 2031, when we're doing the studies, hey, we got some background stuff that tells us whether we should do it and how we should do it as well. So, by the way, two of the guys on the Corps actually were my students. And so they're actually doing a lot of work, with these guys. And don't sell them. There's a lot of great work in this report. I mean, seriously, there really is a lot of great work in this report. It's up to us, though, to look at those pieces that, we might want them to tweak to actually see what's going to happen. I'm going to shut up.
So, quick point, couple of points. Another missing piece in the in both the draft as well as the 203 is the flooding. Now, you talked about flood rise, but now we're talking about infrastructure, city of Wilmington, and other low-lying areas that could be severely impacted. And it's even stated in their report, 203 report, that there will be additional flooding caused by the dredging. That's one important point. And the other one, I want to go back to the 4 parts per trillion. The Brunswick County Harbor plant is going to be pitching out at 5,000 gallons per minute, either an order or two magnitudes greater than that.
Yeah, everybody that you don't know is whenever you do reverse osmosis, it's the gold standard. But what happens if you process that water through filtration? Let's say we're going to have 4 gallons that's clean. Well, in the backflush and everything, then you're going to have 1 gallon to 2 gallons that's used to flush it. Flush that stuff out, then that's what goes into the river. So there is a consequence for using RO as well.
Why don't we take 2 questions, so keeping on time, and then we want to give a summary of where we are. So, Brenda?
I was wondering, would you consider the Cape Fear River as a channel that is like a pipeline effect to it? Because I've read that dredge.
So, and you come in at high tide. I'm not sure that's being justified by putting $1 billion to pay for that whenever, the benefit is going to be $15, $20 million a year.
Yes.
So I think that's something that we should think about.
And one of the things they did address, they said it was going to bring jobs, but I've read a lot of these warehouses, they're hundreds of miles, and they could go 100 miles away, the warehouse, and that there's emissions from that, and where's that, those jobs supply to Wilmington?
Don't know that.
Why don't we take one more question, and then Brayton's got a kind of a closing comment, and then Kelly's gonna give us some updates as well before we end our meeting.
Yeah, so I read the EIS pretty extensively. It's about this thick. And I could go spend an hour talking about my issues with it. But the thing that really struck me, as you said, is that they've been dredging the river since 18 whenever. And there was a recent dredging project back in 2000, 2005. There was obviously an extensive EIS that was produced for that project. And so the question that comes to mind is like, well, what did they learn? Like, how did they take the EIS from the previous project and see if their predictions all came true? And there was none of that. There was nothing in there about that.
Actually, that was a UNCW study follow-up on that.
Yeah, that there was an extensive
But that
study.
was not a very detailed study about what the detailed impact were. That was to look at, what would happen after that into the marsh. So everybody knows, what that study was. But I think they looked at it. They have to. I know they looked at the aquifer stuff because Bill Harris, who was a professor at UNCW, actually did some work on that. You know him.
Yeah.
And so they actually looked at that pretty extensively. And that also led them, for instance, that in drilling the rock at the time is they found that you couldn't go down and just explode the rock. You had to actually cap it to maintain the explosion in the water to minimize impacts to the aquatic life that's there. And so when they do this, they're going to drill a hole into the rock, cap that, and blow it up with the cap on the rock to minimize damage. So there are some things that they actually do with those pieces. But I agree.
They learned nothing. From all their previous work, they learned nothing.
They should look at, I'm going to tell you, I'm a seasoned person myself now, so I think that you should call on the guys who've done work before and make sure that you're tuned in to what those guys have looked at before, because it makes a huge difference. And the one thing that we'll say with this is that one of the things that we need to think about is this is a long process. That may be what Frank's going to say, but I'm just very quickly. You may not be in a position to make comments right now to the Corps. Come next September, that's when the EIS is going to come out. And then there will be a public comment period on that as well. So it'll be interesting to see some of our comments. They didn't take many of the comments from the preliminary thing that we said. You could probably vouch for that as well. So we're hoping they'll take some now. But that doesn't mean you can't contact people like Commissioner Zappel, Mayor Sappho, well, Tom Tillis for now, and Bud and Rouser. You should tell these people what you think in this interim. And even though these Elgin may not listen to you directly, send them the comments anyway. You think all 4 of those PFAS chemicals should be included in this analysis. Now, it may not help, but I feel really bad if something happens and I haven't sent something in. I got to tell you, I just can't be good with myself if I don't say so. Commissioner Apple knows that. So, anyway, I'll leave it right.
Just a couple of quick comments. Someone asked what can we be doing now. I will tell you what I do. I build my playbook. I don't want to use the sports analogy, but I start building those things that I know, those things that I trust, those things that I'm not too sure about, so that I can bring in folks like Roger and start now developing our base level knowledge for the next round for the EIS when that comes out. I don't know how many people here are Googlers, but I would suggest that if you are, go home and Google Michigan and PFAS. The state of Michigan has a group of people, I forget the acronym, that work with the Corps of Engineers. They study PFAS in harbors, and they literally have tied the Corps into knots. I'm serious. They have gone out, done their homework, found those places that are contaminated, and said, you're not going to go here. They've literally shut down harbor dredging. So I would go and Google that, study it a little bit, and who knows, maybe we could add a little bit more common sense to all of this. All right, Sarah,
Well, I'd just like to say on behalf of the Sierra Club, we're really very pleased that both Brayton and Roger came here today. Again, incredible amount of information that they have, knowledge that they have, and the time that they give us. We're so appreciative. So I think this is really an excellent program. So I'll turn it back over to Kelly.
So if you go to CapeFearSierraClub.com, if you Google it, it works too. But you'll see our website, and we do have a direct link to, oh, if I clicked it too soon. We have a direct link to the Wilmington Harbor and Code and Canopy, but also if you go to our issues page, you'll see that we have a new issue, the interbasin transfer from Fuquay Marina. That's an important issue to learn about. The Wilmington Harbor Deepening. So this link here takes you to the NC Coastal Federation's website and the Southern Environmental Law Center and all these organizations, Cape Fear River Watch, Sierra Club North Carolina, a coalition fighting this project. There's my picture. But this is a link to the Army Corps of Engineers. There's more details, lots of impacts. We've got multiple letters from Brayton Willis here. So again, if you just Google Cape Fear Sierra Club issues, you'll find it. I want to also point out we have multiple events coming up. Our monthly programs are on here. This RSVP site takes you to the Sierra Club website to register. So we do put things on Meetup. That is for everybody to find it. But then there's a link to our website to make sure you register on there. Or you will have me try to help you register outside. Happy to help, but it's easier to do it ahead of time. And that way we can keep track, we can keep in touch. Once the video of what we do here, and then anything we talked about and links to what we talked about will be in those follow-up emails. So it's really important that you register and check in so that we know you're here, we can see how many people come, we can try to make things better, and we can communicate to you. We have additional events coming up. There's a brisk walk at Brunswick Nature Park. There's also a trail cleanup for Halliburton. Thanks to them letting us use this space on a monthly basis, we come and help with maintenance. And then we have another program. We moved it to Monday, so the one on February, and we'll have details of what's coming up, but I believe Tim Armstrong from the National Weather Service is going to be here, so that's going to be a great talk as well. But the RSVP site is there. So as we plan events, they show up on our event page. But that's where you can find everything. And yeah, so we thank you very much for coming. Thanks to Halliburton for letting us host. Thank you. And yeah. If you guys have questions, concerns, you guys can email us at capefearsierraclub@gmail.com. But you know how to find us at this point. So thank you. Kelly. Yeah.
Hey, nice job on the website and all this.
Thank you.
And I really like videoing too.
Yeah, when it goes that long, it overheats because this camera isn't, designed for extended video. So there's going to be some breaks, but we get what we can get.
No, it's really, the whole club is really.
Thanks.
Great job.
Thank you.
Getting it dressed up. No, it's